details in the case against the man accused of murdering a young Massachusetts woman.
I could never find the words that could ever express what is truly in my heart.
On July 23, 2013, Boston woke up in alarm. The city, accustomed to the measured rhythm of a summer morning, suddenly found itself at the center of one of the most shocking stories of the decade. A young woman, Amy Lord, a 24-year-old fitness club instructor, was kidnapped, forced to drive to several banks to withdraw cash under threat of violence, and then murdered in the southern part of the city. Her death was not just a tragedy, it exposed the painful issue of women's vulnerability in a metropolis and reminded us how thin the line is between safety and danger, lurking in the shadows of city streets. Amy lived in South Boston, a neighborhood popular with young professionals, active, cheerful, and surrounded by a large group of friends. She was just starting to build a life after college, working as a trainer and teaching fitness classes. Her morning on July 23rd began early, as usual. Exercise, shower, coffee, and a short walk to her car. No one saw anything suspicious, but at around 6 a.m., surveillance cameras captured Amy leaving her home and walking to her parked car. A few minutes later, a man appears on the recording. He approaches her, says something, then suddenly grabs her. After a series of stops, the perpetrator took Amy to the Hyde Park area, where he murdered her. Her body was found later that day in Stony Brook Reservation Park. Her car was found burned near her home. Within hours, the tragedy had gone from a local incident to national news. Reports of the incident shook Boston. Newspapers ran headlines such as "Brutal Murder of Young Woman in South Boston" and "City Searches for Maniac." People couldn't believe that it had all happened that morning on the streets they walk every day. South Boston, considered a relatively quiet neighborhood, was temporarily transformed into a place of fear. Amy's parents, upon learning of what had happened, flew into the city from Wilbraham, a small town in western Massachusetts. For them, Boston had always been a symbol of opportunity, a place where their daughter could fulfill her potential. Now this city had become the place where her life was cut short. Amy was the kindest soul, her mother would later say. She believed in people, and that's what killed her. The news showed photos of Amy, smiling in her sports uniform, with friends, jogging in class. These images contrasted with the cold chronicle, cordoned off tape, police officers by cars, investigators in gloves. Against the backdrop of the summer sun and the green streets of Boston, the story seemed impossible. Neighbors said they heard the sound of an engine and dogs barking that morning, but no screams. It all happened in a flash. And that's what made it so terrifying. A chance encounter on the street, 1 second, and a person disappears. The Boston authorities quickly realized that this was not an isolated incident. Within hours of the murder, similar attacks were reported in neighboring areas, attempted robberies and kidnappings of women. This meant that the perpetrator was still at large and could strike again. By evening, the city was in a state of alarm. The police issued a statement advising residents to avoid walking alone in the morning and evening, to be vigilant, and to report any suspicious individuals immediately. Additional patrols appeared on the streets. Television news broadcasts began with the words, "Boston searches for Amy Lord's killer." For many, this day became a symbol of the loss of the illusion of safety. The city, where people jog along the bay in the morning, drink coffee at local bakeries, and return home late at night, suddenly realized that even a familiar route could become a deadly trap. It was on that morning, July 23rd, that a story began that would not only lead to the capture of the killer, but also become one of the most high-profile courtroom dramas in Massachusetts in a decade.
Tonight, we've learned a Suffolk County grand jury has returned an indictment against the man accused of killing 24-year-old Amy Lord.
The morning of July 23rd, 2013, began like any other for Amy Lord. She woke up around 6 in the morning in her apartment on Dorchester Street in South Boston, an area that in recent years had been considered one of the safest in the city. It was a hot summer, the sun was already high in the sky, and the streets were filling with the sounds of the awakening metropolis. The hum of cars, the barking of dogs, the clinking of coffee cups from nearby cafes. Amy was a creature of habit. Every morning she woke up at the same time, made a light breakfast, and got ready for work at the Lifestyle Fitness Gym, where she led group training sessions. Her colleagues described her as incredibly energetic, attentive to detail, and always in a good mood. In the evening, she had plans to meet up with friends to celebrate one of their birthdays. Her neighbors recalled that Amy seemed calm and focused, as usual. At around 6 a.m., she left the house to go to the gym, where her first class was scheduled to start at 7 a.m. Surveillance cameras installed on the facade of the building captured her. Sports uniform, backpack, hair tied back in a ponytail. A few seconds later, another figure fills the frame, a tall man walking in the opposite direction. It was the first and last encounter that would change everything. From 6:30 to 7:15 a.m., Amy Lord visited 5 banks, South Boston, Roxbury, Dorchester. At each stop, she withdrew money from her account, standing next to the kidnapper. Surveillance cameras captured their faces. Amy was pale, tense, her hands shaking. The man next to her was calm, composed, his gaze cold. Police would later say that the video was painful to watch. Every movement the girl made was an attempt to buy time, a chance for rescue that never came. After the last ATM, Amy's car turned off the main road and headed towards Stony Brook Reservation Park in the Hyde Park area. It was a remote area, dense vegetation, trails, few people. There, out of sight, the criminal took her life. According to the investigation, he beat and strangled Amy, then dumped her body in the woods and set her car on fire to cover his tracks. When Amy didn't show up for work, her colleagues immediately suspected something was wrong. She was never late or missed classes. By 9 a.m., they started calling her phone. No answer. By noon, her worried friends contacted her parents in Wilbraham. They knew that if Amy wasn't responding, something serious had happened. The police received a missing person report that same day. Within a few hours, investigators began collecting data from surveillance cameras, bank transactions, and mobile operators. That evening, they were informed that a body had been found in Stony Brook Reservation. The description left no doubt. Amy's parents were notified in person. Their lives were divided into before and after. Her father would later say in an interview, "She was just going to work. She was doing what everyone does every day." And someone decided they could take everything away from her, just like that. When the news spread, the city froze. Television showed footage of Amy smiling in the gym, hugging colleagues, and participating in a marathon. People who saw these photos felt as if they knew her personally. Hundreds of posts appeared on social media with the hashtag #JustIceForAmy, a symbol of shared grief and anger. But for the police, that morning was the beginning of a manhunt. Investigators knew that the killer had acted quickly, cold-bloodedly, and would likely strike again. And they were right. On the same day, there were 2 other attacks on women in Boston who miraculously survived. Both cases turned out to be connected to one person. When Amy Lord didn't show up for work on the morning of July 23, 2013, alarm bells started ringing immediately. For her colleagues, this was not just a case of her being late. It was uncharacteristic. Amy was always the first to arrive, turning on the lights and preparing the studio for classes. An hour after she went missing, the trainers began calling her cell phone, then her parents. By noon, the police knew about her disappearance. At that time, Boston was already buzzing with alarming rumors. Several reports of attacks on women had been received in different parts of the city. The morning incidents in the South, Boston, Roxbury, and Dorchester areas were similar. Men were trying to force women into their cars. 2 managed to escape. The police began to realize that the same criminal might be operating in the city. At around 3 p.m., on July 23rd, a call came in from the Hyde Park neighborhood. Residents had noticed smoke in the Stony Brook Reservation Forest Park area. When firefighters arrived at the scene, they found a burning car. The license plate indicated that the car belonged to Amy Lord. After extinguishing the fire, investigators looked inside. There was no body in the passenger compartment, but signs of a struggle were evident. Damaged seats, dirty shoe prints, and traces of blood. Next to the car were tire tracks leading deeper into the forest. By evening, the area was cordoned off. A few hours later, about half a mile from the road, in the bushes under a tree, the body of a young woman was found. In her pocket was a bank card in the name of Amy Lord. At that moment, everything became clear. News of the discovery quickly spread. Reports showed footage from a helicopter, police cars, investigators' tents, yellow tape blocking the entrance to the park. Official confirmation came late in the evening. The body had been identified. It was indeed Amy. Investigators immediately began working at the crime scene. Forensic experts determined that death was caused by suffocation and multiple injuries. The girl had tried to resist. The nature of the injuries indicated aggression and physical force on the part of the attacker. Sand and grass were found in the pockets of her clothes, traces of the body being dragged along the ground. At the same time, the police analyzed the transactions on Amy's bank card. It turned out that in the morning hours, she had withdrawn money from various ATMs. All transactions took place at intervals of about 10 minutes, which indicated coercion. Bank cameras provided clear images of a man standing next to her. These images, later shown on television, became key to the investigation. The Boston police set up a special task force to search for the perpetrator. The news reported a name that would soon be known throughout the country: Edwin Almeida, a 35-year-old resident of South Boston. He was identified by witnesses to other attacks that occurred on the same day. Women who managed to escape described a tall man with short cropped hair and a distinctive tattoo on his neck. The evidence gathered matched. The shoe prints near Amy's car matched samples found near the sites of other attacks. Detectives noticed the same tattoo in a bank vault.
Law enforcement officials say this man, 29-year-old Edwin Almeida, is responsible for the crime as well as several other attacks on other women.
On July 25th, 2 days after the murder, Boston police arrested Almeida. Actual records indicate the name Edwin Almeida, or Edwin Allen, in court documents, Edwin Allen. He was arrested without resistance at his girlfriend's house. During a search, they found clothes matching those worn by the figure in the video recordings and bank cards belonging to Amy. Journalists immediately surrounded the police station. Photos of the detainee made the front pages of newspapers. At a briefing, the Boston police chief said, "We cannot bring Amy back, but today her killer will not be able to hurt anyone else." It soon became known that on the day of the murder, Almeida had committed 2 more attacks on women in different parts of the city. Both managed to escape, and their testimony helped the investigation confirm his involvement. For the Lord family, that day marked the end of a painful wait, but not a sense of relief. Amy's father told reporters, "This is not the end. This is the beginning of a journey that will lead to justice." Memorial events were held throughout the city during those days. Candles were lit on the waterfront and in parks. People brought flowers, photographs, and notes. Boston still remembered the pain of the 2013 marathon, and now found itself once again in a position where grief united everyone. The discovery of Amy's body was a turning point. Now the investigation had a face, the victim and the perpetrator. But there was a long road ahead: interrogations, trial, years of waiting for a verdict, and the killer's attempts to justify himself. After the suspect's arrest, the Amy Lord case became one of the most high-profile and thoroughly investigated in Boston's history. The police worked tirelessly, systematically and methodically gathering evidence to ensure that the perpetrator had no chance of escaping justice. Within the first day of his arrest, it became clear that they were dealing with a man with a long history of violence who had simply remained at large for too long. The killer's name was Edwin Almeida, Edwin Allen, 35, previously convicted of assault, robbery, and attempted rape. He spent almost 10 years behind bars, but was released on parole. And it was after his release in 2013, a few months later, that he began hunting again. Investigators determined that the morning of July 23rd was not the first day he had been roaming the streets of South Boston. Surveillance cameras recorded him in the Dorchester Street area 2 days before the murder. He was watching passers-by and circling houses where young women lived. He was looking for a target. When Almeida was arrested, they found a cell phone on him that had saved his travel routes, which matched where Amy went missing and where other attacks happened. In the trunk of his car, there were traces of blood, which later tests confirmed matched Amy Lord's DNA. Her bank cards and a necklace were also found, which her parents recognized during questioning. The investigation lasted almost 2 years. Forensic examinations, dozens of witnesses, reports from criminologists. The police officers involved in the case later said that they had never seen such precise and rapid work from all of the city's departments. "We knew we had to see this through to the end, for Amy's sake and for the sake of everyone who is now afraid to walk the streets," said one of the officers. During the investigation, a disturbing truth came to light. Several weeks before the murder, Almeida had attacked other women. Several victims survived and gave testimony. Their stories were similar: early morning, deserted streets, attack from behind, demand for money, attempt to push them into a car. Only Amy did not manage to escape. This testimony strengthened the prosecution's case. The prosecution proved that Almeida's actions were not spontaneous, but systematic. The investigation also revealed that the probation and parole service had made a number of mistakes. Almeida did not undergo mandatory checks, did not wear a GPS bracelet, and did not report to the inspectorate. These facts caused a public scandal. Journalists and politicians demanded reform of the supervision system. If the supervision had been adequate, Amy Lord would be alive, Boston Mayor Thomas Mino said at the time. By 2015, the investigation was complete. Almeida was charged with 5 counts: first-degree murder, kidnapping, rape, armed assault, and robbery. His lawyer tried to get him declared insane, arguing that the defendant suffered from impulsive disorders and disturbances in his perception of reality. But a psychiatric evaluation found him to be fully sane and aware of his actions. The trial attracted enormous public attention. Newspapers reported that the courtroom was packed with people who had come to see the man who had taken the life of a young woman simply going to work. Amy's family attended every hearing, sitting silently in the front row. During the trial, prosecutors presented a detailed picture of the crime based on video recordings and witness testimony. Each episode was reconstructed almost minute by minute. When the judge played the ATM footage of Amy standing next to Almeida, the courtroom fell silent. All the evidence came together to form a single, terrifying pattern. The crime was not accidental. It was a cold-blooded, deliberate act, an expression of violence for the sake of control, humiliation, and power. By 2015, it was clear that there was no excuse for Almeida. The trial moved on to the sentencing phase. When the name Edwin Almeida, or Alan, first appeared in the press, the public experienced an almost physical shock. The man who kidnapped and murdered Amy Lord was no stranger to the system. He was a criminal with a long history of violence who had already served time in prison and was released despite warnings. His biography became a symbol of the failure of supervision, and his personality an example of how a broken man can become the embodiment of ruthless evil. Edwin was born and raised in Boston, in the disadvantaged neighborhood of Roxbury. His childhood was a mixture of poverty, street gangs, and constant violence. His mother often changed partners, and his father was unknown. At the age of 13, Almeida was first reported to the police for assaulting a peer. Later, he was reported for robbery and attempted theft. He dropped out of school at 15 and spent his early adult years on the streets, getting by on odd jobs and sleeping at friends' houses. In 2001, he was convicted of assaulting and raping a woman in the same neighborhood where Amy Lord would die 12 years later. He served almost a decade in prison, was released on parole, and essentially immediately returned to his old habits. Psychiatrists who studied him after his arrest wrote in their report, "He lacks empathy, guilt, and understanding of consequences. He lives by the principle of instant gratification and perceives other people as objects." According to former prison guards, Almeida was a typical example of a social predator. He did not show aggression in prison, but was withdrawn, watched others, and avoided communication. He knew how to be invisible. It was this quality that made him particularly dangerous. The ability to blend in with the crowd, to look normal until he decided to strike. After his release, he lived on welfare for several months, working odd jobs, but soon began wandering the streets of South Boston again. No one knew that he was already looking for victims. The investigation later established that a week before Amy's murder, he had attacked 2 other women, one in Dorchester, the other in Roxbury. Both survived, but described the attacker with frightening accuracy. Unfortunately, the police did not manage to connect the episodes. The psychological profile of Almeida compiled by FBI specialists was chilling. Egocentric, narcissistic, impulsive, strong sense of resentment toward society, perceives violence as a way to assert power, prone to repeat offenses. When journalists sought comments from his family, his relatives refused to speak. One of his cousins said briefly, "We didn't know there was a monster inside him. He just disappeared when he got out of prison." At the trial, Almeida behaved detachedly. He rarely looked at the jury and hardly spoke. Only once, when Amy's mother was giving her speech, did he look up, and, as eyewitnesses noted, smile. This moment caused a storm of indignation. Amy's father, Greg Lord, later said, "He looked at us as if he was proud of what he had done. He wasn't a human being. He was an emptiness wrapped in skin. Commenting on the trial, forensic psychologists said that this crime was an example of an extreme form of narcissistic and sadistic disorder. Almeida was not looking for profit, he was looking for a moment when he could feel like a god. For such people, the victim is not a person, but a function, a means of feeling power. Against the backdrop of his indifference, the story of Amy, a girl for whom life was action, energy, and joy, sounded particularly poignant. She believed in the power of kindness and hard work and helped others to become better. The contrast between her and her killer became a metaphor for the whole tragedy, light and darkness colliding on a July dawn. When the prosecutors read out his sentence, the courtroom was packed. Almeida listened without emotion, no confession, no apology, only silence. And when the judge asked if he had anything to say, he said, "She just happened to be there." These words provoked anger and tears, but they also revealed the truth. There was no reason for his crime, only an abyss inside him that demanded a new victim. The sentence was harsh but fair, life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. Judge Judith Cahill, reading the decision, said, "You have not only taken the life of a young woman, but you have also violated the very sense of safety in this city." Boston will not forget Amy Lord. There was a tense silence in the courtroom. Amy's family sat in the front row. Her mother, Patricia, did not cry. She just stared at her daughter's killer, not looking away. When the judge finished, she said quietly but firmly, "Now you are gone, as you should be." Amy's father later told reporters, "Justice is not victory. It is simply order restored after chaos. We are not celebrating. We just know that this man will never walk the streets again." The district attorney noted in an interview after the trial, "This case was a test for the entire system. We saw how one man was able to destroy lives because the supervision mechanism failed. We must learn from this." After the verdict, the public demanded change. Discussions began in Massachusetts about reforming the parole system and monitoring dangerous criminals. Amendments were made to strengthen the supervision of those released after violent crimes. The media called it the Amy Lord effect, when one tragedy changed the approach to safety and responsibility. But for the Lord family, the main task was not only to seek justice, but also to preserve Amy's memory. In 2014, they established the Amy E. Lord Foundation, which helps young women develop leadership skills and engage in sports and the arts. The foundation's motto is, "Live energetically, love openly, do good." These words were taken from Amy's notes found in her diary after her death. Every year in July, on the anniversary of her death, Boston hosts the Amy Lord 5K Memorial Run, a charity race that attracts thousands of participants. People run along the waterfront, along the very streets where Amy once lived and worked. It is not a mourning, but a celebration of strength, light, and memory. The girl's mother says that this is exactly how her daughter would want to be remembered, with a smile and movement. In 2022, almost 10 years later, Edwin Almeida's name reappeared in the headlines when he filed an appeal demanding a review of his sentence. A federal judge denied the appeal, leaving the decision in force. For the Lord family, this was yet another reminder that even years later, evil tries to regain its voice. But the truth remains the same. The verdict is final, and justice has prevailed. Today, a photo of Amy hangs in the studio where she once taught. On the wall are her words, written in marker a few days before her death. "Every day is a chance to be better than yesterday." This phrase has become a symbol not only for those who knew her, but for everyone who has heard her story.